That's right. I thank him. I thank him for being my grandfather. I'm proud of him. You know, you have the whole world. I feel excluded, but in my deaf world, it's smaller, it's limited, it's the same old gossip. But at the same time, I'm fascinated. Fascinated. I love it. I love spending time with him. Oh, wait a minute. Deaf power. So, what's the heart of a deaf world? Well, it's the deaf club. So, why didn't we write about that? Why don't we write a play about that? And then he accepted that idea. He liked it. And from there, we really, every week after dinner at my home, we were working together back and forth. Yes. We'd come up with some important information, not the plot. The plot would come later, but first we came up with the deaf characters. Yes, that's right. Yeah, we spent almost no time, and I agree with you 100%. And I was so excited because of my background. My father used to be the president of two or three different deaf clubs, and so I was raised. I grew up in the deaf clubs, going and going and going to all the different deaf clubs. So your suggestion of why not focus on that idea, that immediately piqued my interest. Yeah, Fred Schreiber, his sign name, Fred Schreiber, is the same name for Jew. And so he was the president, or rather the executive director of the National Association for the Deaf, NAD. And the two of us were good friends. And again, I was talking about the production of a play and the theater, and I was thinking of the 100th anniversary, the centennial of NAD. And he said, "Oh, I love that idea." But what happened was he died. And so what we had agreed upon, what we were writing down, was passed on down to Gary Olson. And Gary continued down that path. So we asked for auditions, and we had 100. First of all, we had 100 deaf adults file in for the audition, and now here we are looking at all the candidates. And from that point forward, we discussed, we analyzed, and many of those individuals had experiences relative to the Deaf Club. They had all personally experienced that. So that's how we started. And we began to select the typical person who would frequent the deaf club on a regular basis. That person, yes, that person was a treasurer. That person was a president. That person did this, that, and all of that. And we finally came down to which of the individuals did we want. We chose 20 characters. And out of those, one, at least one, had to be a hearing person. Usually back in those days, this person typically was an individual who would go to help interpret for the deaf. They had a heart for the deaf, and really that we created this from our own imagination. This hearing character typically would this person would have a previous deaf boyfriend herself, and they broke up, and so she had a warm affinity for deaf people and wanted to go. It wasn't professional, but rather personal to help interpret for them. So that's fine. So the remaining 18 or 19 individuals were deaf characters. So we would select those with that in mind. We started that process, whittled it down from 100 to 20 final individuals for the actors and actresses. So from that point, then we began with the improvisation, and we would improvise on this or that. And we would say, what would happen in a deaf club typically? And they would say, deaf people are always drinking and they're always fighting over what? Usually over peddlers, and we would add to that and add and add and add. The storyline and the plot would grow. And during the improvisation, he was seated watching. I was in charge of this, directing this, and I said, "Hey, capture this idea, capture this," and he recorded everything that he could. And then at night at his house, usually Thursday nights, usually Thursday evenings, we would look over all the information that had been recorded, and we would develop the script based off of their improvisation. And it continued to grow and grow and grow. We would tweak it and revise the process and bring it back to all of the actors and actresses. They would look at it, review it, and kind of copy and go off that script. And eventually, before we knew it, we ended up with a complete script. So we thought, of course, we had to take the time to polish it up and to fine tune this script. You know, and this was a play that was in being, so to speak. Every rehearsal, we were learning something new, developing new ideas with our eyes, and really from the actors and actresses, they too experienced the same thing. And so, for example, one particular actor who was full of energy would just kind of march in and think you wouldn't think this person was an ABC card peddler, but they were dressed to the nines, showing off their money that they had made. So again, every time we would improve upon and add to with new ideas and concepts. Now, I want to talk about the translation. Of course, you can't write ASL on with pen and paper, so that it was straight English, pure English. But we were trying to avoid the English idioms, the hearing way of saying something. We wanted to avoid it and keep it just pretty much bare bones English. So now here we are working with the individual. How would you interpret your character? Well, typically we want to know how you would sign it. So they would reverse. They would translate from English to ASL. We'd watch to see if they really were able to capture this idea. We had to admit, each and every one of those individuals really did a fabulous job. They all did their homework. They all assisted and helped each other and said, no, 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 that's not the deaf way. That's not the way people sign it, or vice versa. And they were giving feedback and constructive criticism, helping and working each other. There was no pride or ego that was present. We were all working in unison. It was really a beautiful process, and I was very proud of that group. I would have to say that most thanks to you for being the director and knowing how to bring this out of the individuals, out of the actors and actresses, because he really has that special knowledge for sign language and to help give advice to improve someone's signing ability. For example, it really took a long time, about 8 months, and a long process. We were fortunate. That we had the luxury of taking our time. We would practice every weekend, mostly on weekends, right? Yeah, that's right. And many of the individuals were working people. Of course, it's hard to get them together. So one or two couldn't make it. We would focus on this one scene, then go to the next scene. And we just kind of managed and navigated our way through this whole process. And this was all done for volunteer. There was no pay. So I would sit in the middle of the audience so that I could scan my head to the audience and watch the reaction of the people to the production. And I would see a lot of people laughing and crying and emotionally touched. At that point, I knew we had succeeded. And that was a big relief. What made it so enjoyable? Why did people cry and so forth and get touched emotionally? Because it's really, people would say, that's like my people back home. Yes, 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 that's my experience. Yes, it's the same thing that I experienced. It's the same way when we went to Deaf Way conference. There was a lot of foreign individuals there, and they would say the same thing. They would say, oh, that's just like my people back home in my home country. So what does that tell me? That told me that this was universal. I remember there's one funny, after a particular show, some people came up to this one actress, this one lady came up to this actress who played the role of a widow. Her husband had died in the show and she ended up with a drinking problem. So this deaf lady said, you know what? You're just like me. My husband died as well. I've been lonely and I have a drinking problem. The actress said, pardon me, ma'am? She said, I'm just playing the part. And the deaf lady went, oh, that identified her. She identified with that actress. That's why I left the National Theater for the Deaf. I helped to found the NTD. Yes, I supported. It was a wonderful journey, and really NTD plays a profound role in helping to change the image of deaf people. And I believe that and believe in it so strongly. But I did my part. Now it was time. I had a hunger for something more. So time to move on, to develop a different type of theater where it could tell us about ourselves. I wanted that so badly, and how we could connect one another and how the two of us could work together. He could bring that deaf experience as well. Now, can you imagine? It was not one, it was really two or three people, really. They'd come up to an actor who was playing the role of a treasurer who was guilty of embezzlement from the deaf club. And this deaf person said to the actor, "Oh, you're just like me. I've embezzled as well." And the other person, "So I didn't know." "Well, that's not me. I was just playing the role." Oh, and the deaf person said, "Oh, but I understand, but your deaf club fired you and kicked you out. Mine only suspended me for 1 year, and they let me come back. But your experience was disappointing and too harsh, too strict. They shouldn't have done it." So we didn't. We left that alone. We didn't do anything with that. I came to NTID. I don't remember exactly when it was. It was maybe 16, 17 years ago, and they were doing our production, Tales from a Deaf Club, and it was produced or directed by Patrick Graybill. And so I came for that. I was so excited to see how it was going to come off. And of course, he did a tremendous job producing and directing that and following our play, our script to a T. And there was a small auditorium. It wasn't here, it was in the city. And it was a small auditorium. I was seated in the back, and I noticed towards the front two young deaf men that came in. They were kind of hesitant. They sat down, and it looked like they had never been to a deaf production before. You could tell that from the conversation I was picking up on. But they were seated in the first row, right by the stage. They weren't elevated, but right by the stage, watching the acting go on in the corner. At the end of the performance, when it was done, what happened? Those two deaf men walked right up to the director and said, "Hey, where and how can I join this club?" We laughed and laughed. Patrick Graybill, he remembers that very well. We all had a wonderful laugh. We thought, well, what does that tell us? We just thought they thought it was so believable. They thought it was the real thing. In our deaf world, we're always talking about language, sign language. No, this is wrong. No, we're criticizing someone's English or criticizing this or that. And we wanted to incorporate that into our show. So we thought if we had something similar to that, maybe a woman that would begin to use some signed exact English and say, "Oh, I can't help it. My children go to school and they pick it up and they learn. And forgive me for using that. The all the endings on the signing." In 2 weeks, we're going to have a beautiful, wonderful Thanksgiving. It's going to be so exciting. Hey, 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 listen, lady. Listen, you're signing with all of the signed exact English, the endings. This is the ASL Deaf Club. Use ASL. I'm so sorry. It's a habit. My children influence me with where they go to school. I'm sorry. Okay, all right, give them a chance. Okay, in 2 weeks we've got to play. So another one is, you know, there was a graduate from Gallaudet University coming in using all the large, impressive, sophisticated terms, trying to impress people. And a deaf person was like, "Hey, quit with that attitude." And you know what? That happens often within our own deaf world. "Hey, you just came in, you're signing." I'm thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a minute, that's Gallaudet sign language. That's normal. I know a lot of these people, they can't sign. They're using the colloquialisms or local dialect. What did you just say? What would you just sign to me? Hey, look, that's beside the point. Here's my point. I just want to warn you. Listen, all these people that are here, if you're here to try to make friends with them, right? You want them to accept you, right? Listen, don't be a smartass. The point The one thing that I can recall from memory is that the Deaf Club is would often have a New Year's Eve party, and deaf people would come in, and some of the people would basically desert a particular new individual, or they would have a fight with them, or they would kick them out. They would try to be assertive and join that particular deaf club. But I always remember that taking place, and that had an impact on me. And then we would have an individual or a treasurer or somebody that had already quit the group, and they forced this individual to leave. And this person was like, hey, what do I do? What do I do? This is my home. He says, look, I understand there's all these debts. I understand that I took money. I understand that you have to suspend me, and it's my fault. I should have admitted this before. It's my fault, but I was afraid. I was afraid of a severe punishment, but the worst punishment a deaf person could get is to be kicked out. What do I do? Where do I go? Do I stay home? I'll be lonely. It's just my wife and I will look at each other, and there's nothing exciting about home. This is my real home. This is my number one home. This is a place that I love. I love the deaf club. Give me a different punishment, but don't banish me completely. Why? The Deaf Theater is really focused on writing plays for, of, and by deaf people. And that's what we really need. We need more performances. The Hearing Society and World has their, long list of playwrights. Arthur Miller, A Social Perspective, and then Tennessee Williams, and the people and the problems and the frustrations. And we see a lot of that. But how can we relate to that? For me, it's hard to imagine if a deaf person were to take a performance from the hearing world, such as Tennessee Williams's play that is called The Glass Menagerie. If you've seen that, it's nice. You can see it. But for me, it's hard to really internalize and accept it because I know that performance, I've seen it from the hearing perspective, but now deaf people are trying to act in that hearing way. And it's not part of us. It's not part of me. It's not part of our deaf world. We need something. We need more plays that are written and that tell who we really are as individuals, collectively. And I'm very excited about that. I'm hopeful that this will continue and with additional younger playwrights in writing their own works. I'm going to get a big, tall one. It's going to have all kinds of shapes and curves. It's going to shine and it's going to be empowering. I'll tap it on the side and clap.